Hey everybody. So I watched the Phoenix Rising documentary, and I had originally said that I had not watched it or not had an opportunity to watch it because I had canceled my HBO Max subscription sometime beforehand, and I did not want to be in the position of giving HBO traffic information that said that people were signing up for HBO Max and immediately going back and watching. Immediately going and watching Phoenix Rising. I didn't want to give them that impression because I don't want them to encourage them to do more documentaries like this. But a longtime viewer of the channel reached out to me and loaned me his HBO Max login information, so I was able to watch the documentary last night. Initially I had done a video about the documentary, like listing all of my thoughts about it in one big video, and of course, that ended up being unwatchably long, and I really felt like I wanted to break it down again, as I have before, break it down into specific topics to talk about. But in this video, so future topics will include, for example, the segment on Twiggy Ramirez. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the segment involving heart-shaped glasses, the music video for heart-shaped glasses, and all of that. And so I wanted to, there are segments like that I want to talk about, but I also wanted to do this as just an overview of some general observations I had, just to give you my responses. Now, one thing was I did the video, the initial version of this video, immediately after watching the documentary, because I wanted to get like a visceral, immediate response to it. On second thought, I'm glad I gave myself the opportunity to sleep on it, because it is a very impactful documentary, and I will say, and I'm not saying this to be condescending or dismissive at all, it is an extremely well-made, well-put-together documentary. And we know Amy Berg is an accomplished filmmaker, and so obviously it's going to be set up well. There were things I actually really liked about the production. Like, I really liked the animation that they had. I liked the Lewis Carroll Alice in Wonderland style animations when she was growing up. I actually really liked the reproductions that they did. There's certain animations that are reproductions or based on Marilyn Manson's paintings, and they did a really cool job with that. And having the scenes where showing a painting of him where the makeup melts away and leaves the Brian Warner underneath. From a production standpoint, there was a lot of really cool stuff, and yes, it is very emotionally intense to watch. I was sitting there, my nervous system was telling me, Jordan, you promised us you were never going to make us watch Requiem for a Dream again. What is this? So yeah, very impactful, very intense. And the thing is, and this is something, so as I've been talking about in these videos, the through line in all of these videos is that when the allegations were initially made, I was a hardcore, diehard, ride or die Marilyn Manson fan who believed and took Evan Rachel Wood's side. My heart went out to her immediately, and for an entire year up until the lawsuit, up until Manson filed his lawsuit, I was begrudgingly but wholeheartedly on Team Evan Rachel Wood. And after the lawsuit was filed and the evidence presented in the lawsuit came out, I came back to supporting Marilyn Manson. However, that said, it is, as I've always said, I'm Team Manson in all of this, but what I have is cautious optimism. I don't want to go full tilt on this and just, go off half-cocked and everything. I also don't want to appear insensitive to survivors of domestic abuse. Something I talked about in a previous installment in this commentary, actually a couple of previous installments in this commentary, was that as all of this is happening, especially a couple weeks ago, I was dealing with a situation in my own life involving a friend who was being, a friend who was and unfortunately probably still is being abused in a domestic environment. And so these things are real; they happen, and I am not negating the reality of what survivors go through, especially. Sorry, low flying plane. Anyway, especially as a survivor of abuse myself in different aspects of my life. Uh, when I watched Phoenix Rising, so I want to talk a little bit about smaller points, smaller observations I had about it. I'll focus on the bigger things later. But um, when I watched it, I was very much in a position of my heart and my empathy goes out to this woman. And my mind and my logic are over here saying, wait, there are all of these problems with it. And I say that to say that this is not easy for me, and I am not trying to have a cavalier attitude about this. I'm doing this because I want to try. I appreciate what Colonel Kurtz is doing and people like her, but I want to try to inject some new perspectives and some new ideas that occur to me that maybe people aren't aware of. As I've said before, I do believe that regardless of where you stand on this issue or the reality of this issue, we should all have sympathy for Evan Rachel Wood, because one of three things has happened. Either she was abused and manipulated by Marilyn Manson, or she was abused and manipulated by Ilma Gore, or she was abused and manipulated by both of them. After watching the documentary and having time to sleep on it and think about it and the Marilyn Manson lawsuit, my stronger opinion is that it is probably the third option that is most likely the correct one. And I'll go into greater detail on that. But first and foremost, now I wrote down a lot of things that were like observations that I have a very clear point of, and then other things I wrote down were just things that occurred to me. They don't necessarily mean or imply anything. And there's a big one I'm going to talk about in a minute. But anyway, one thing I noticed is one thing that came up immediately in the HBO, when you pull up one of their a movie on HBO Max, the format has the movie you're about to watch, and then like most streaming services, the recommended stuff down. It's just my hand, sweetie. This isn't for you. You're silly. Did you know you're silly? Anyway, hey, sweetie. So she's biting my hand. Anyway, in the recommended section for stuff on recommended if you like section, the next thing that came up was The Vow. The Vow is a documentary. It's an excellent documentary about NXIVM. And NXIVM is a cult. It's been broken up, but it was a cult founded by Keith Raniere, and it was already a very ethically dubious Scientology-like organization from the get-go. But what ultimately broke it up was within it there was a subgroup within NXIVM that was set up. Ostensibly, it was set up for women within NXIVM to come together and share, feelings about sisterhood and female bonding and all of that, and be a social group for the women. And what it actually was a private harem for Keith Raniere, where the women were coerced and trafficked into being his sex slaves. Allison Mack, famous for Smallville, was the show Smallville, was Keith Raniere's accomplice in all of this. They are both now in prison. The Vow documentary is actually one of the things that was a tremendously important step in getting justice for those women and everyone else associated with NXIVM, because one of the people that was directly connected to NXIVM, directly involved with NXIVM, who flipped on Keith Raniere, was the man, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he directed a famous kind of New Age documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know? And he was famously associated with Nexium. He was one of the big people championing it. He flipped on Keith Raniere, and when he flipped, he had he had already been documenting Keith Raniere with the intention of doing a positive documentary, portraying him in a documentary that would portray him in a positive light. So he had all of this footage of Keith Raniere, and that was crucial in helping when he flipped and helping the FBI get involved and actually bring Keith Raniere to justice. So that was very important. It's a very important piece of work. But it occurred to me that after HBO put that out, they put out Alan v. Farrow. Quite frankly, Alan v. Farrow is a documentary that is supposed to it's another one-sided documentary. That one is about the now 30 some odd year old allegations against Woody Allen, the claims that he sexually abused and molested his adopted daughter Dylan Farrow. That documentary, being again also just a hardcore Woody Allen fan from a filmmaking standpoint. Being a huge fan of Woody Allen's movies, I've seen nearly all of them at least once. Being a huge fan of his movies, I was also familiar with his life story, and that those claims have been roundly debunked, and they continue to be debunked over and over again. And so much so that there's a YouTube video documentary called "By the Way, Woody Allen is Innocent" that addresses about 98% of the claims that are in Alan v. Farrow. None of that stuff was new. It's all been gone over extensively and debunked. I do think that this is why in the Manson v. Wood scenario, I find myself saying it's possible that Evan Rachel Wood was abused by both of these people, because that was the realization I came to with regards to Alan v. Farrow. Either Dylan Farrow has been abused by her mother or been abused by her father, or both. So again, in that situation, we do have to reserve sympathy for Dylan Farrow. I think there is extraordinary evidence that Dylan Farrow was abused and manipulated by her mother. And suffice it to say, as I have always said, I don't believe in cancel culture. Mia Farrow is a phenomenal actress, and I continue to enjoy her movies. Just as I continue to enjoy Evan Rachel Wood's movies and acting. The last thing I saw, or most recent thing I watched her in, was I recently watched The Wrestler and thought she was phenomenal in that. Now, of course, as I said before, I made a deal with my nervous system that we would only watch Darren Aronofsky movies one time each. That's another matter. But the point being, I will always continue to enjoy the work of these people, regardless of who is or is not at fault in these situations. So, what I started to wonder about with that is this is now the first of those documentaries, The Vow, phenomenally important, did a wonderful public service. But it also introduced a profit motive to HBO to publish this kind of content. So now we do Alan v. Farrow. Now we do Phoenix Rising. And what it makes me think is, what's the next HBO cancel culture expose documentary? Is it going to be an Amber Heard going after Johnny Depp kind of thing, or something like that? It worries me that it's worrisome enough when social media is weaponized against people. It's even more worrisome when a major film distributor initiates capitalizing on a profit motive around cancel culture. I feel like we live in extremely paranoid times, and I feel like these documentaries, run the risk of increasing the level of paranoia. In fact, I don't think it's even a risk. I think they do. We live in a very paranoid society now. I mean, Franz Kafka, having just finished masturbating to a porn parody of Black Mirror, could not come up with something as paranoid as the society we live in now. Anyway, getting back onto the point of Phoenix Rising. This is where I talk about there are reactions that I had to it that were just profound reactions to me that I'm not necessarily implying anything. I'm not going anywhere with it, but it is concerning to me, and it's just something that occurs to me. And one of the first things I notice, the first thing we see in the movie is Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore sitting next to each other. And and the first thing I realized is they're dressed the same. They're wearing the same outfits, which is odd. But then I noticed something. I had never seen Ilma Gore, really seen Ilma Gore. I had seen her Twitter, her Twitter posts where there's an ID picture that's that big. But I had never really seen Ilma Gore before this movie. And this is the first thing, and I wrote it down here, and it just hit me, and every time, every single time Ilma Gore was on the screen, this would occur to me. Ilma Gore looks like Marilyn Manson. I mean, she really looks like Marilyn Manson. The way she not just the way she dresses, but the way she, the pale skin, the intentionally pale skin, and then she's covered up with tattoos. She has very similar hairstyle. She's covered up with tattoos all the way up the neck onto her face, or up the neck close to her face. And then she has she does that same like exaggerated baby doll makeup thing that Marilyn Manson does. And what's amazing is there's one scene where she's being interviewed and she's wearing this outfit that she's got that stylized baby doll makeup looking thing and a baby doll style dress on. And what's amazing is that's something that is popular in the goth community, that look. It's a look that Marilyn Manson and Twiggy they themselves popularized. They're the ones that popularized that in the early days of Marilyn Manson, and they would dress in drag that way for interviews, and it was so surreal to me. I mean, and again, that's the thing. I'm not trying to necessarily imply anything one way or the other, except that it was just so surreal and ironic to me that Marilyn Manson's cultural impact has been so great that one of his number one detractors is taking fashion advice from him, or taking her fashion design from him, probably not even realizing it. So it was such a weird thing. But even in the face, Ilma Gore looks like Marilyn Manson. Like, they both have that really sunken down chin and everything, and that very sharply kind of curving down V-shaped sort of face. And I'm not implying anything with that. I don't know what I was thinking about, like, what could that possibly mean? What significance could that have? I don't know. It just, every time she would appear on screen, especially when obviously you're seeing images of Marilyn Manson on screen a lot, and there would be things where for a second I thought I was seeing archival footage of Marilyn Manson with Ilma Gore, and then Marilyn Manson with Evan Rachel Wood, and realized that was Ilma Gore with Evan Rachel Wood. I'm not implying anything with it. I don't know. It was just weird every time. Anyway, now, a big question I had when I started watching this, I thought, will they disclose the romantic relationship between Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore? Newsflash, no they don't. Or spoiler alert, I guess, no they don't. And this is very important, because not just Marilyn Manson, but all of Evan Rachel Wood's relationships are under the microscope in this, or at least the ones that were significant in her life are under the microscope, especially the relationship with Jamie Bell and all of that. These relationships, and it's like, this is what a good relationship looks like, this is what a bad relationship looks like, this is how I changed over time with these relationships. Throughout, these relationships are important. Do they disclose the relationship between Ilma Gore and Evan Rachel Wood? No. And that is a very important thing because um, like I talked about in my previous video on this topic, I talked about a book called Michelle Remembers by Lawrence Pastor, by Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pastor, which was supposed to be about, it's a wide, now, it is now largely forgotten because it's been widely discredited, but in the early 1980s, it was a huge best-selling phenomenon. People were blown away by it, they were fascinated by it, and it was this woman, Michelle Smith, claiming to have suffered heinous abuse at the hands of a satanic cult, and her memories of this were all entirely fabricated things that had been put in her mind due to strong power of suggestion from Lawrence Pastor, who was her therapist. And one of the big things that revealed that there was more to this than people wanted to admit at first. If you had contradicted Michelle Remembers 40 years ago, you would now be placed in the same boat as people who are contradicting Phoenix Rising. Oh, you horrible person! How can you not believe a survivor's story? All of that, and then it comes out that the thing was a hoax. Anyway, one of the big things that alerted people to question the veracity of Michelle Remembers was when it was discovered that Michelle Smith, during the time that these therapy sessions that unearthed the memories were going on, Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pastor both divorced their spouses and married one another, and that's very significant. It indicates a tremendous ethical lapse on, or even an ethical absence on Lawrence Pastor's part. And so those things are significant. That is very important that they do not disclose that Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore were in a romantic relationship. All right, let's see. Okay. Oh, also, the documentary directly states that Ilma Gore was a part of the founding and the creation of the Phoenix Act, that this was very important and very crucial, and she was crucial in the creating of it. It is discussed in detail in no uncertain terms, made clear in no uncertain terms. So for Evan Rachel Wood to now be distancing herself from Ilma Gore and trying to downplay Gore's involvement in the Phoenix Act is very, very significant. Then, other things, like I made a note. There are these scenes where we have extended scenes of watching old home movies of the Wood family running around and having fun. I'm not sure what the point of that was. These, again, like I said, these are just random thoughts as they came to me. Okay, so one thing I wanted to mention here was, now there's a couple things. First of all, I had talked previously about how Colonel Kurtz had pointed out that it's stated in the documentary that Evan Rachel Wood has difficulty understanding fact from fiction, fantasy from reality. Okay, this is where I really do appreciate everything Colonel Kurtz has done, but I wish she had stated this better, because it's not, I agree with her assessment of what we see early on in the documentary, but it's not something that's overtly stated. It's not like it comes out and says, yes, she couldn't tell fact from fantasy. You kind of start to realize it's kind of, there is an implication that she's not totally in control of her mindset and all of that. It's strongly implied, but it's not overtly stated. So while I would agree with the assessment, and I know Colonel Kurtz in reality has some background in all of this, so she's someone who could make a professional background, so she's someone who can make these kinds of assessments. But the thing of it is, I really wish it felt like she kind of went off half-cocked saying that, and so I wish she could have clarified it a little better. But anyway, one of the things that occurs in the early aspect of the movie, the early aspect of the documentary, where they're talking about her early life, is they talk about the split between Evan Rachel Wood's mother and father. They talk about that there was a very toxic thing going on. They talk about, for example, one time she asked her father why he was yelling at her mother, and he said, "This is what people in love do," which obviously is a horrible thing to say to a child. Being charitable with it, he probably was trying to say that people in love people in love often are have very strong feelings, and sometimes those feelings result in an argument, and it's not a good thing, but it just happens. You can explain arguing parents to a child in a way that does not directly say, someone who's in love with you will be yelling at you. But what is said shortly after that is very concerning to me, and I want to do this will come up more. My thoughts about the mother will come up more in my comments on the heart-shaped glasses video. But something that's important was very significant to me was it says that Evan Rachel Wood and her mother fled. They fled the home where they lived with her father. That word fled is used, and it's emphasized with a very dire tone. And that implies, when you say you fled a place, you fled your home, that implies that you're not safe there. That is what that means in no uncertain terms. Then in the very next breath, the documentary talks about how they gave the son, Evan Rachel Wood's brother, the opportunity to choose between going with the mother or the father. So wait a minute, why did you have to flee to get one kid out of that situation, but the other kid got a choice to stay? That's very suspect to me. Very suspect. And throughout the documentary, the mother did not sit right with me. Again, like I said, I'll get into it in the heart-shaped glasses video discussion. But the mother never sat right with me. And one of the big things about that, one of the interesting things they said early on, Marilyn Manson, early on in the relationship of knowing Evan Rachel Wood and everything, Manson told Evan that she needed to go look at the contractual management arrangement that her mother had, the control that her mother had over the career, and he encouraged her to go do that and find out what was actually going on and how her career was actually being handled and what kind of contractual obligations her mother had her under and that sort of thing. She went and did that, and in the movie she just says something like, "And I did not like what I found out." So she acknowledged there was something there in how the mother was handling her career that she did not like, and immediately they go from that to, that was an early example of Marilyn Manson trying to separate Evan from her parents. Wait a minute. Evan was a grown-up, a legal adult. Yes, it is very unusual and very unorthodox for a 37-year-old man to be in a relationship with an 18-year-old, but she was ultimately an adult. And also, Marilyn Manson, I do think from what was described there, I do think Marilyn Manson as a music, film, entertainment industry veteran had a very good and very wise observation in telling her to do that, because a lot of child stars and child actors have been screwed over by their parents. Hint, hint, Macaulay Culkin. Hint, hint, Britney Spears. It's a very common occurrence. And so that is probably very good advice that he gave her, and I think she begrudgingly acknowledges that there was something about it she didn't like. And again, I don't like the way the mother handled the career. I'm going to get into that. The early career, I'm going to get into that in the heart-shaped glasses video. But it's also very suspect to me that her mother's idea of fleeing the home, she fled the home where the father was. Her idea of fleeing the home was to take her out to Hollywood country and set her up with an acting career. I think if a child is being abused and is unsafe and needs to get out of their home environment, the very last thing they need to do at that point is turn around and launch an acting career. Like I said, the mother was one red flag after another. And like I said, the biggest red flags of all will be discussed in the heart-shaped box video. Let's see, moving on from there. One thing I thought about, she says that Marilyn Manson was working actively to break her up with her boyfriend, Jamie Bell, at the time, who was Jamie Bell. And it sounds like, from what they described, though, it really kind of just sounds like, it really sounds like it was more like she just kind of decided that she liked hanging out with Manson more than she did the other guy, and Manson kind of liked hanging out with her more than his wife. It seemed like something, I mean, people's relationships get upset like that sometimes when they meet new people, and it's not always a clean break. But it felt like this part where they were calling it grooming really felt very hollow for me, because what I would do if I'm judging and coming to an understanding of what's happening, trying to understand what happened, I'm going to try to have to, in absence of a Marilyn Manson, Marilyn Manson's side, hearing that and all of this, I have to think, well, what could be the other side? What could be the reality of this? And during this period of what they describe, over and over, it felt like they were trying to spin things that seemed fairly reasonable, and they were trying to spin them in such a way that that it would seem more dire than it actually was. Now, I want to say that's not to negate the claims of abuse that happened later on. That's for a separate discussion. I'm talking about the initial stages of all of this. I really do feel like the initial stages of this relationship, from what they describe, sound a lot more innocent. It sounded like they were really reaching during this part. Now, one of the things one of the things that occurred to me was the Phantasmagoria project. Now, they tried to play it up. They tried to play up Phantasmagoria as being something that Marilyn Manson pulled out of his ass as an excuse to hang out with Evan Rachel Wood and spend time with her. And they don't directly say it, but the strong implication is that it was just something he made up to spend time with her. There was never a project. There was never going to be a movie. It was just a ruse. It was a casting couch. It's an example of the casting couch phenomenon in action. But the thing was, I remember when Phantasmagoria was announced. That project was announced. Pre-production was underway. You can actually look up, there was a movie poster of it, a teaser poster that was released. That project was underway. That was a legitimate project. Now, that does not mean that does not preclude the possibility that he had ulterior motives for bringing her on, but it was a legitimate project. It was not, that was planned. It was not something that was just pulled out of his ass. And the next thing that occurred to me was, the next thing they brought up was, they said that he started love bombing her. And one of the things, they emphasized some very specific things that he told her at the start of the relationship that they're calling love bombing. Now, I have been love bombed. And I know what that experience is like. And it tends to be, when you're dealing with toxic narcissists, they usually, you know what, I don't want to get into it too much, because I don't want to talk too much about my experiences with that. So I'm going to close the door on that topic and move on. But I do dispute that some of the things that were said were love bombing, for a very specific reason. She says that what he told her was that she inspired him to be Marilyn Manson again. That she said that he made, she said that that he told her she was the inspiration for wanting to make music again and wanting to be Marilyn Manson again. And the thing was, I know, being a Manson fan, I knew that he was at a crossroads, especially after the relationship with Dita Von Teese ended. He was very much at a crossroads, and he was vocal about his feelings, not wanting to do, of being tired of being Marilyn Manson, of wanting to pursue other things, other interests. Phantasmagoria being an initial foray into that. But one of the big things that verifies that is, I actually heard I wish I could find it, but I actually heard an interview with Alice Cooper, who toured with Marilyn Manson during this time. And he said that during their tour, Manson was having a lot of problems performing. He was not enthusiastic about it. He was phoning it in every night. And Alice Cooper took him aside one night. They sat down and they talked for a while. And Manson, dog outside. Anyway, Manson confessed to him that he was really depressed because of the relationship, the failure of the relationship with Dita, the divorce and everything. He was depressed about that. He was disillusioned with his career in a lot of ways. And Alice Cooper said that on that tour, he became a kind of a informal, therapist for Manson and helped him talk through his problems and his feelings and everything. And he said that it actually showed up, that the change in that showed up in his performances, that he was singing well again. He was giving good performances, putting his spirit into it again. And knowing that, and then knowing at the time also he was vocal at the time when "Eat Me, Drink Me" came out, that much of that content was inspired by Evan Rachel Wood. It is entirely possible that she was his muse, especially because we as the public knew about these problems that he was having, this kind of identity crisis he was having before they were involved. So I do think it's possible that relationship and that connection he felt with her rejuvenated him. One of the another big thing that really resonated with me was Twiggy, the segment where they brought in Twiggy. And I will go into Twiggy in greater detail because I have a lot of thoughts about that. But they talked about how the real abuse before Twiggy got back in the band, Manson was maybe a bit needy, emotionally needy, and he was a bit needy and a bit overbearing. But the real abuse, the real dark side of Manson, as they portrayed in the film, did not come out until Twiggy got back in the band. That was when things got really bad. And the observation that they made was that when Twiggy got back in the band, Manson was acting like it was like he thought, oh, I'm 20 years old again, or I'm 19, 20 again. It's going to be wild. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a party. And that was when things started getting really bad. And if I had to evaluate the psychology of Marilyn Manson as I'm observing it through all this, and where did all of this darkness come from and everything, part of me wonders if what's really going on here is we don't talk about these, we don't think about this because it's Marilyn Manson, it sounds like he's on top of the world, but what if this is a middle-aged man going through a midlife crisis? Because through all of this, I'm trying to think like what could be driving Manson to do these things. If these things, assuming these things are true, what could be driving him to do these things? And one of the things I kept coming back to is like, I wonder if that's part of it. It's like I got Twiggy back in the band. I got this hot young early a 19, 20-year-old girlfriend, smoking hot young girlfriend and everything, and I wonder if it was like he was trying to feel young again. He was trying like that was the shot in the arm that he needed, that he was approaching middle age and he was feeling disillusioned with where he was in life, and I've certainly gone through that myself. And I say that because obviously I'm not as successful as Marilyn Manson, but I am a professional musician, and and I get to, I'm not married, I don't have any kids, I'm a professional musician, and people think, well, gosh, it sounds like you're living an awesome life, and I wish I had your life at age 38, and it's like, yeah, but you still get a midlife crisis. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you still get a midlife crisis. And so I wonder about that. I wonder if that's part of, I wonder if that's part of it. That brings me to my next one. Like I said, I'll go into Twiggy in much greater detail when I talk about that. But another thing that occurred to me, and this is actually, I want to pay the filmmakers a compliment, and again, it's an unironic, genuine compliment. I really like that they took the time to look into Marilyn Manson's backstory and the Brian Warner's backstory, and look at his early life growing up, and acknowledge that he is a product of extraordinary abuse. He suffered some very real, very horrifying abuses growing up. Things that went well beyond school bullying into the realm of sexual abuse, into the realm of into the realm of real horrifying, traumatizing degradation and things like that. He himself suffered very horribly. And this brings me to another thought about what might be motivating Marilyn Manson, is that I think he probably has post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And I say that because I was diagnosed a while back with PTSD myself. And I thought about it, and I thought about, well, what could be... at the time, I thought PTSD was something soldiers get. I thought it was like, the landmine knocks your Humvee over, and and that's how you get, or you see your buddy get his leg blown off. That's how you get PTSD. No, it's cumulative. You can accumulate PTSD, influencers of PTSD or PTSD triggers over time to the point that the bow finally breaks. And I think that is what happened with Marilyn Manson over Brian Warner early on. Is I think he suffered extraordinary trauma and extraordinary abuse, and he's been very open with the fact that Marilyn Manson as a personae was created to was created to cope with and to portray and dramatize the abuse that he suffered. This is this horrible inner self that he has, that he created something artistic with it. And so what I think about in that is I think about something I saw, an interview I saw with Sir Patrick Stewart, where he talked about how, Patrick Stewart, if you don't know, is obviously, he's Captain Picard, but he was he has been an extraordinary advocate for victims of domestic abuse. That has been a huge, huge thing that he has advocated for, and he has done a very good job advocating for it. But in an interview, somebody said, well, do you have any idea, because his father was extremely abusive, horribly abusive. And so they said, well, do you have any idea why your father was like this, and have you figured anything out? And he said that at one point, he was, I believe it said he was talking to it was like a woman that was a guide at some sort of war memorial or something like that. And he talked about, his father was a veteran, a war veteran, and from the early half of the 20th century. I don't remember if it was World War I or World War II, but one of them. Anyway, his father was a veteran, and he talked about how happened to talk to this tour guide about how abusive his father was of his mother. And she said, your father probably had post-traumatic stress disorder. And and she said she probably had PTSD. And to anyone that's about to get any ideas from what I'm about to describe, I don't deal with the symptoms I don't have the severe symptoms I'm about to describe. It's very much, the situation's very much under control for me, but, and I am in therapy and that sort of thing. But she said that what they found, soldiers coming home for the longest time, the idea of understanding PTSD and all of that, that is a very new phenomenon. And it's a very new phenomenon, and at the time, for the longest time, soldiers came home from war and we just dumped them back home. We dumped them back on, at the bus stop, and that was it. Thanks. And so soldiers would come home from war having horrible PTSD. There was a term called shell shock, but it was more slang than anything else. Soldiers would come home from war, and we would, and they would have no resources to help deal with what they had, these very real things they encountered. They had PTSD. And she said one of the things they realized is there's this huge parallel between the men who perpetuate domestic violence, the symptoms that we see of men who perpetuate domestic violence and the symptoms we see in men who are confronting PTSD. Alcohol, substance abuse dependency, wild, erratic mood swings, unexplained panic, unexplained bouts of anger, things like that. She went into a list, and Patrick Stewart said this was describing his dad perfectly, and he realized there is this very strong corollary that a lot of these men that were becoming abusers because they had PTSD and had no resources for how to deal with it, had no way of even knowing that anything was wrong with them. And so Patrick Stewart said that he now campaigns for domestic violence. He campaigns against domestic violence for his mother, and he campaigns against post-traumatic stress disorder for his dad. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, and it's a very humanizing thing. And I think that the documentary unknowingly provided a window into a solution for this, because we'll entertain for the sake of discussion that everything that gets said about Manson in the documentary is true. Saying that is obviously a sick person, and the picture that they paint in the documentary is not just of a mindless sociopath or something like that, or a mindless sadistic sociopath or something like that. It is a picture of someone who is himself in a great deal of pain, who is suffering and is hurting. And that is something I agree with, and something that I have long agreed with as a Marilyn Manson fan. And there has been, in the Marilyn Manson fan community, of which I've been a part of for decades, there's been a lot of discussion about this very phenomenon, that that he seems to, his substance abuse issues are very much a problem. The one drunken shit show after another at his concerts, that sort of thing. These are things that Manson fans have been concerned about, and I think it points towards somebody who needs very real help that he's not getting. And this is why, as Trevor Noah so accurately put it, we should be a counsel culture, not a cancel culture. We need to do the better thing and try to get people help and the resources that they need, not just write them off as vile, villainous, evil people and kick them to the curb for the rest of their lives. That is not a humane thing to do. That does not speak to the better nature of our humanity. If people are suffering this way and they are hurting this way, then we need to get them help. Now, granted, there will always be people who are purely sociopathic, purely psychopathic, who cannot be helped. That is a very different variety, and it's a different variety from what's described with Marilyn Manson. Those people, yes, it is impossible to help those people, but the overwhelming majority of people are not those people. We need to be counseling, not canceling. That was very important to me. And with that in mind, and then later in the film we hear about some very heinous, very horrifying acts of abuse. There is a number of people have been talking a lot about this guy, Dan something or other, I can't think of his last name, in the documentary, who is is supposed to be like a defector from the Manson camp, who is, he's a defector from the Manson camp that's supposed to come forward and say he's on Team Evan and everything, he's going to verify everything. He really doesn't say very much in the documentary. We just know that he's on board with Evan Rachel Wood, and then that's about it. He has like maybe 3 or 4 lines of spoken dialogue. And also, this is something Colonel Kurtz noticed, the other women that are accusers are not only do they not really say anything. There's one other accuser that says something, but it's not, they are not, those women, they don't sit down and interview them. There's a circle of women with Evan Rachel Wood talking to these women, and we see them talking, but we really don't get a whole lot of substance from what they say. There's one woman who speaks a little bit. Esme Bianco says absolutely nothing, and that's very strange, and is barely on camera at all, which is very strange when you have a very, very major star of star of screen and television in there. She was being primed as being like the second most important victim in all of this, and then when the movie actually comes out, she's hardly in it at all and doesn't speak or anything like that. So that was weird. I don't want to go into the Dan guy too much, but other people have really gotten into him. But like I said, he's a surprisingly minor figure in the actual movie. And there's other things like that where they say things that don't really add up to anything. Like, for example, and again, I'm going to do a heart-shaped glasses video, but at one point in the documentary, there's a whole scene where they're telling Evan Rachel Wood, people from the crew for Heart-Shaped Glasses have said they're going to come forward and verify everything you say. And Evan Rachel Wood is crying and, with joy, weeping with joy that finally people believe her and everything, and they're going to flip on her. The crew is going to flip and come out and support her and everything. And then they never do. Like, they don't. And certainly, if that had happened, that would already be out in the media as well. But no, they say we found people from the documentary that are going to support what you, or from the music video crew that are going to support what you say, and then they don't. And that was very weird to me. And there's a lot of things in the movie like that don't really are set up to have a payoff, and then they really don't. The groupie video, of course, they lie about what's in the groupie video, and that is, we know, is wholly and completely incorrect. Paula Weiss was a consenting adult when she appeared in the groupie video. She has been very vocal about that, and everybody on the pro Evan Rachel Wood anti Marilyn Manson side has completely ignored that. One of the most grievous and devastating claims that Ilma Gore made, one of the things that she is now being sued for, is objectively and totally not true. And that really is very damning in all of this. Now, the thing is, towards the, there are things like there's one thing I really wanted to get into. People were saying, I didn't know what this was, but I was seeing all of the response from people who were saying, fuck Marilyn Manson, fuck Marilyn Manson, all of this stuff on Twitter. And then they would also say, oh, and fuck Perez Hilton. I didn't know what that was about, because as far as I'm concerned, Perez Hilton is trash, and I have no interest in him or anything he does. But, yeah, all of those articles, see, I don't read celebrity gossip bullshit like that, but Perez Hilton was writing these articles calling Evan Rachel Wood calling her a whore and a homewrecker and tearing her up in the media and all of this stuff. No, shame on you, sir. That is disgusting. That is despicable. And that really does rile me up. That really makes me sick that there are people who make a living, they make a career spouting rumors like, girls in junior high school used to, that kind of thing. That is bullshit. That is disgusting. Regardless of who is culpable in this situation with the Gore, Wood, Manson, all of that shit is despicable, and you should be ashamed of yourself, sir. Not that you will, because if you were capable of shame, you would not be Perez Hilton. Anyway, and then, one thing I thought was interesting, both halves of the documentary end with a statement on screen acknowledging that Marilyn Manson is suing Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore because of the accusations. And I thought that was interesting. I'd be interested to know whose idea that was. Was that the HBO? Was that HBO saying, "Look, we have to do this for legal reasons," or did Amy Berg think that was a good idea? Kudos to them for being willing to acknowledge that. Regardless, I thought that was very important. I thought it was good that they acknowledged that, even if they just did it because they had to. So now, one of the big things, and I'll wrap this up for my general observations. one of the big things that they build up to. So the whole movie, the whole arc of the movie is building up towards where Evan Rachel Wood finally puts, finally pushes send on the Instagram/tweet message that, she gets it out there, and it's a big emotional moment. And what's interesting, one thing that's interesting to me is she's surrounded by family and friends, but as soon as she sends the tweet, the first person that comes over to hug her is Ilma Gore, and everybody else watches that. Which, like I said, makes it look like Marilyn Manson is coming over to hug her. But but anyway, one very big, and I know if you've seen the documentary, like I said, I'm skipping over some major parts that I want to go back and talk about in their own segments. But I want to close with this, because the whole narrative arc of this documentary has been moving towards her finally sending that message. There are two things I want to say. First of all, I was somebody who, when that tweet was posted, like everybody else, I took the tweet at face value. I did not know what was going on behind the scenes. If I had known if I had known that her posting that tweet was being done to give a documentary about her and about her relationship with Marilyn Manson, a closing story arc, I would have been a lot more suspicious. But I, like everybody else, thought that tweet was being presented in and of itself for no purpose other than for Evan Rachel Wood to make that statement. I did not know about everything that had been going on behind the scenes. None of us did. And our reaction, our huge reaction in support of Evan Rachel Wood was played up as this groundswell of support for her after it in the media after it happened. I do not like that we got played that way. I feel taken advantage of, quite honestly. And that was one of the things that gave me an unsteady feeling about all of this. Once I found out that she had greater motives for posting the tweet than what was initially presented, that there was also this movie, there was also all of this other stuff on the table, that did not sit well with me at all. But I want to close with one final observation, and it is this. One of the big narrative elements in the documentary is they keep saying, as they're building up to her sending the tweet, the message, it's on multiple, it goes out on multiple formats, but I'll just call it the tweet. Anyway, as it builds up to her sending that tweet, she keeps saying, I'm scared of what Brian's going to do. I don't know what he's going to do. He's going to lash out. He's going to freak out. I'm scared. He's going to do something. As soon as I do this, he's going to know that he's backed into a corner, and he's going to start freaking out, and I'm scared of what he's going to do when this tweet goes public, because he'll know he's backed into a corner. Marilyn Manson has behaved perfectly in all of this. Perfectly. As soon as the accusations came out, he posted a statement denying it. He dropped out of public life altogether. The only public media coverage of him has been from paparazzis and people that have seen him show up unannounced at events and that sort of thing. He has not done any publicity. He has not done any self-promotion. He has dropped out completely. He has said everything through his attorney, and he has remained completely quiet about it and completely professional about it. He has handled himself perfectly for a year. He has handled himself perfectly. And God knows if he had done anything criminal in this time frame, we would know about it. I do believe that the goal of that was to try to trigger Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner, into acting irrationally, into giving them something that would justify this huge buildup in the movie of, oh God, he's going to do something horrible. He's going to come after me. Oh no. And that has not happened. And like I said, if that had happened, we would know about it. The Phoenix Rising side of all of this would have gotten that information out to the media instantly. The person, now they make it's funny, it's very ironic, some of the things they say, but they talk about how narcissistic, abusive, manipulative people start freaking out and can't shut up when they get backed into a corner, when they know that they're backed into a corner. That is true. I've seen it happen. But what's funny is, in all of this, the person that has been acting like scared, has been acting like they're backed into a corner, has been terrified in all of this, is visibly worried about what's going to happen next, has been Ilma Gore. She's the one who can't shut up. She's the one who has no self-control. She's the one who idiotically claimed ownership of the documents that that Marilyn Manson's lawyers presented as evidence of forgery and fraud and conspiracy against Marilyn Manson. She claimed ownership in a tweet of those documents. No wonder, and now Evan Rachel Wood is distancing herself from Ilma Gore. And so, like, if we are going by the rubric of what they lay out in the documentary, Ilma Gore is the one that has behaved the way they were expecting Marilyn Manson to behave. And that is huge. That is very significant. Now, like I said, all of this is still up in the air. All of it remains to be seen what happens next. But what happened was, it feels like in the documentary, it feels like with the thing about the crew from Heart-Shaped Glasses supposedly coming forward, and then they don't. At least to my knowledge, they haven't. I've not seen anything that says they have. It feels like they were trying, they were banking. It's like they made this documentary banking on the idea that there would be this expected payoff from all of these people, and they've not gotten anything that they've expected in terms of how people have behaved. So that's the thing. At the end of the day, Marilyn Manson has been the one that has handled himself well publicly for an entire year of abuse. He has handled himself professionally, publicly. Ilma Gore has not, and that is very significant. So anyway, that brings us to an hour. Like I said, I will be back to do more specific commentaries on Twiggy, on the Heart-Shaped Glasses segment, and some other things later on. Anyway, thank you for watching. Take care.